Welcome back. In my last couple videos, I talked about Real Genius from 1985 and My Science Project, also from 1985. Both of those movies didn't get the attention they maybe should have because they got sucked into the vortex that was Back to the Future. Today I'm going to be talking about a fascinating little movie from 1986 called The Manhattan Project. It has some similarities to 1983's War Games, so let's get into it. The Manhattan Project stars John Lithgow as Dr. John Mathewson, Christopher Collette as our main character Paul Stevens, and Cynthia Nixon as Jenny Anderman as Paul's love interest and accomplice. Now, a minute ago I mentioned that this movie has similarities to War Games, which it does. War Games came out in '83, starring Matthew Broderick, and it was about a young genius who nearly starts a nuclear incident. Now, I've mentioned before that some movies just had bad timing. Really good movies came out at the wrong time. The Manhattan Project is another example of that. Now, just to give you an idea of some of the competition this movie was going up against, Top Gun came out a month prior and it was still a massive success in the box office. So was Back to School, the Rodney Dangerfield movie. It was a huge hit. Karate Kid Part 2, huge hit, came out a week after the Manhattan Project. Ferris Bueller's Day Off came out 2 days before the Manhattan Project, and we know that was a massive hit. Sylvester Stallone's Cobra came out a month prior. Poltergeist 2 a month prior. Raw Deal, Short Circuit, Space Camp. All these movies basically sucked all the life away from the Manhattan Project. So if you remember this movie, chances are you're just an old person like me, and you remember watching it on cable over and over again. It seemed like it was on a daily basis. However, it's not one of those movies you really hear talked about or see very much. And with the advent of streaming apps, you're kind of rolling the dice as to whether or not some of your favorite old movies are available to watch. Sometimes you have to go out of your way to try to find these movies. And the Manhattan Project is definitely one of them because it is not available anywhere on streaming for free. So for the 1 or 2 people watching this video that have never seen this movie, I'm going to give you a quick plot synopsis. The movie starts out in a lab with John Lithgow's character. He's created a new fuel for nuclear bombs for the government. They decide they want to fully fund his research, and they move his entire operation to a secret location in upstate New York. We then meet our main protagonist, Paul, and his mother. Paul's a super smart kid, but he's kind of a menace too. John Lithgow's character needs a more permanent place to stay, and this is where he meets Paul's mom, who happens to be a real estate agent. He also meets Paul and notices that he has an interest in science, while also being interested in Paul's mom. Being horny for Paul's mom, John Lithgow decides to get in good with her son. He invites him to the lab, which has been disguised as a medical research facility. Being the smart kid that he is, Paul realizes there's a lot more going on in this lab than medical research. He realizes that there's plutonium, and he decides to steal some so that he can create a nuclear bomb for a science project and to kind of impress his girlfriend. John Lithgow and the government discover what Paul's been up to, and then they start a manhunt. And I'll leave the synopsis right there. If you haven't seen this movie, it deserves a watch, because this movie takes place at a time when American fear of war with Russia, especially nuclear war, was at an all-time high. The Manhattan Project also does something that all the best movies do: setups and payoffs. Just a quick example, there's one setup where John Lithgow's character shows Paul a laser in his lab. He shows that laser can shoot through steel. Well, when Paul is trying to steal the plutonium, he ends up using that same laser to cut a hole in the wall so that he can sneak the plutonium out. There's also another really good setup and payoff that's really important to the climax of the film, so I don't want to give that one away. You should really watch it. This movie was well directed and well written by Marshall Brickman, who doesn't have a long IMDb, but I think he did a great job with this movie. I find the critical reception of this movie baffling. It has a low score from the critics and audiences, and there are even more recent reviews of this movie from the audience, and they talk about how implausible it is and how dumb it is and how TV movie-ish it is. And there are a lot of comments that say something to the effect of, it's implausible that this kid could steal nuclear material from the government, blah, blah, blah. But in my mind, I'm thinking, well, how's this any less ridiculous a premise than Back to the Future, which these same people would praise? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, granted, there are things that happen in this movie that just wouldn't happen in real life. They would not let Paul go at the end. That just wouldn't happen. At the very least, he'd be taken somewhere and interrogated for a long time. But you can put those things aside, because with the movies from the 80s, these movies that we love, there are tons of plot holes. And if we focus on that, we could just say every movie is terrible. So I guess you can probably tell, I really enjoy this movie. I really enjoyed watching it again. I hadn't seen it in decades, and it was a treat. Definitely better than my science project. This movie absolutely lived up to my memory of it. So if you enjoyed this, please hit the like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. Let me know if you've seen this movie, if you've seen it recently, and how you feel about it. Don't worry, there's no judgment. So once again, I'm Steve, and I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching.